"Dinner's ready," Eric's mother announced. Eric paused his video game and proceeded down the stairs, quietly, so he didn't wake his baby brother Toby. His stomach growled as he walked into the kitchen. The smell of the cooked turkey made his mouth water. "Smells great, Mum," he said, as he took a seat at the table. His mother placed a plate full of various vegetables, roast potatoes, and a generous amount of meat. He grabbed the gravy boat and poured it all over his plate. Then he grabbed his knife and fork and proceeded to dig right in with a mouthful of juicy, succulent meat. Sitting down opposite him at the table, his mother took a bite of meat, and a smile whitened upon her face. The meat was tender and perfectly cooked. Unlike last year's fiasco in which the turkey was as dry as a nun's cooch, this Thanksgiving was perfect, she thought to herself. And seeing Eric stuffing his face assured her that he too was satisfied. Eric was the first to polish his plate clean, and his mother soon after him was also finished. Eric let out a loud burp of satisfaction, and he rubbed his full belly. "I'm stuffed. That turkey was amazing, Mum. It wasn't dry like last year." "Yeah, I was quite surprised with it myself," his mother replied, as she let out a burp of her own. "What's for dessert?" Eric asked. "I see you're not too stuffed for dessert," his mother said with a smile. "How about ice cream?" Eric's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. "Yes, please." His mother scooped out some ice cream into 2 bowls and placed one down in front of Eric. "How about some homemade strawberry sauce to go over that ice cream?" his mother asked, as she grabbed a jug from the fridge, half full with a thick red substance, and proceeded to pour some over his ice cream, and then sat back down opposite him. "Toby is very quiet tonight, isn't he?" Eric said, as he scooped up some ice cream covered in strawberry sauce and gobbled it up. His mother watched him as he ate. "How's the sauce?" she asked. Eric had a look of disgust on his face. "It tastes like metal." "I was hoping that enough strawberries would counteract that," his mother said with disappointment written all over her face. "Counteract what?" Eric replied, confused. "The blood, of course." Eric's face turned to a look of shock. "What blood?" "Yeah, well, there is a reason your baby brother is quieter than usual. It is because we ate him." "What?" Eric said, shocked. "There was a turkey shortage, and I really wanted this Thanksgiving to be special, so I butchered Toby and made some strawberry sauce with his blood." Eric started to feel sick. His face went pale, and tears started to form in his eyes. "Oh, don't cry, sweetie. Look on the bright side. He tasted great," his mother said, as she embraced him with a hug. "And don't worry, I'll have another bun in the oven for next Thanksgiving." Annabelle Quirk was 18 years old when she got her first cock. Buster was big and fluffy, with a bill of ruby red. Next came some hens: Doris, Florence, and Lynette. Annabelle loved them more than they knew, always doting on them and forever listening to their squabbles, but it just wasn't enough. Annabelle wanted more. The local kids made fun of Annabelle's love for animals. They would come and harass the chickens. Annabelle built a high fence to stop them. It went on for a time, but they grew bored. A day came with an opportunity to help save some animals from a research testing facility. She didn't know what products they were testing, only that they were using animals. Without thinking, she snatched the chance to save a turkey. Buck was the biggest, ugliest thing she had ever seen, and she loved him all the more for it. That night, she built him a nest with Buster and the girls and was happy that her little family had grown. But when morning came, her world crumbled. Lynette was nowhere to be found. Thinking that a fox had somehow entered the enclosure, Annabelle searched the yard, but found nothing but feathers. She buried what little was left and grieved. While Buck was happy with his new freedom, Buster croaked all day long. Annabelle wondered if Buster was just as upset as she was. A month passed until Annabelle woke to a repeat of the horror. Florence was missing. Annabelle's little graveyard now had a new occupant. With only Buster, Buck, and Doris left, she decided to sleep within the enclosure to keep them safe. That night, she woke to the squawk of her family. A man stood with Doris limp in his hands. When he tore at her neck, sending a cascade of feathers to the floor, she screamed. The man, mottled with fur and eyes of a demon, saw Annabelle and charged to slay her. But out of nowhere, Buck came to her rescue. The man fought, but Buck was too strong. He pecked and pecked until the man laid prone on the floor. With an effort, Buck opened his gullet and swallowed the manhole. When Buck shook the last of the man down his throat, and a single hand hung outside of his beak, Annabelle sighed with relief. Buck was the biggest and ugliest turkey she had ever seen, but she loved him all the more for it. Gobble gobble. The following transcript is a PSA from the Republic of Turkey, Vanya. Be nice to your turkeys this Thanksgiving. We're telling you in advance. Spare every head and leg and wing. Give us all a chance. We're tired on being on dinner tables, covered in gravy and mush. We're tired of being kept in filthy stables and fed with corn and slush. We demand justice and equality for all turkeys, big and small. Please show some morality and listen to our call. Turn towards your screens now, for a revolution has begun. Gather your children and your spouse, and make sure they don't run. See, we have your farmers and your leaders, and all those who love eating turkey. We have them prepped and ready for slaughter, or when their brains are all murky. We've seasoned them with salt and pepper, and stuffed cranberries in their eyes, roasted them till they're nice and tender, and finished them off with some spice. Turkeys are coming to feast until their bellies are full. They're coming from north to south, west to east, and taking home leftovers by the bucketful. These are delicious, says Turkey. I especially like how scared they look. These humans once thought they're so lucky, but now they're prepared by the finest cooks. No one is safe from us, for the turkey revolution has begun. We'll round up humans from town to town and bus to bus, and slaughter them under the sun. So be nice to your turkeys this Thanksgiving. Invite them in to eat your finest greens. Otherwise we'll come and hunt you down, even if you run to another town. Every Friday before Thanksgiving, we all sit down at the biggest table in the dining hall to cast our votes. Everybody, from the cleaners to the dinner ladies, to the matron, to especially us 100 children at Little Hills Orphanage, gets one vote each. After counting the papers meticulously, George was declared the winner of this year's choosing. I was quite happy with the results this year. I never liked George. Ever since he came into the orphanage in June, he was nothing but a bully and a menace. He was the biggest of the boys, and everybody feared him, even the grown-ups. He would pull the girls' long hair and steal their money. Once he even broke my color pencils. He didn't even say sorry. I was chopping carrots in the kitchen with my friends when George came in. He looked around angrily like a caged tiger. Everyone held their breath. I want my candy. Now, apparently, somebody had told him there was candy waiting for him in the kitchen as a prize for getting chosen. George dashed up to the nearest boy and shook him, yelling in his face about candy, his spit flying everywhere. I sneaked up above him with the heaviest iron pan I could find in my hands. I could barely lift it. George was so busy whining, he didn't notice me. Clonk. The biggest boy in the orphanage was out cold. Just like that. We wasted no time. Quickly, we lifted him into the biggest special pan that we used every Thanksgiving for this occasion, onto the bed of carrots and potatoes. Then we sprinkled salt and pepper and thyme on him, praying he would not wake up. Finally, we heaved him into our biggest oven. Then we slammed the door shut. The best part was when he woke up. George's eyes widened when he realized where he was, his mouth opening into a silent scream. He pounded his fists on the windows of his prison as the fire rose up and danced behind him. I could see the potatoes sizzling, burning away like hot coals. After all he had put me through, this was more entertaining than televised cartoons. The Thanksgiving feast the next night was delicious. Everybody complimented the way we cooked the star of the show. George was nicely roasted, his skin brown and crackling. And paired with thyme and cranberry sauce, the meat was delicious, especially his fat thighs. It is a pity, then, that we only have this once a year. I wish we could have this more often. This tastes better than the usual turkey other families eat. Perhaps then, when I grow up and move out of the orphanage, I can have this more often. There's plenty of little boys and girls on the streets who tastes as delicious, and I know where to look. I'm a foreigner living in the US. My girlfriend told me excitedly that she was super happy to introduce me to her family. I thought we'd go to her house and have a normal dinner together. Of course, she didn't mention it was the day of an important holiday. Here's the thing, I always heard of Thanksgiving, but I never knew when it was. In my mind, it was the 4th of July, but I was wrong. That's what happens when you've lived in Eastern Europe most of your life. So imagine my surprise when she invited me into her parents' house, just to be received by the whole family, from grandparents to little humans. I lost the words for those little things. Children. Yeah, the loud creatures are called children. Everybody seems sweet. I could tell by just being near them. They were warm and welcoming. They asked me questions. The usual questions a family asks to the boyfriend of their youngest daughter. Nothing out of line, so I was feeling bad about it. Except for the father. Typical tough New York asshole with no filter. My girl seemed embarrassed, but I handled it. I've dealt with thousands of people like him. He was the only one who smelled like shit, though. I wasn't gonna feel bad about him for sure. Dinner went okay. I couldn't eat meat, but I drank some wine. Nobody seemed to care that I wasn't eating the turkey. Nobody except my girlfriend. She was definitely not okay with it. I could tell she was feeling ashamed about the fact I wasn't eating the food her mom made. She loved her family. It was endearing. So for her, I decided to not prolong what I was there to do. Out of respect, and for the appreciation I felt for someone who could love like that, I snapped her neck first, and then fastly knocked everyone out. I had a feast that night on 11 people. Their blood was so good. I could finally understand why she loved them. Of course, I couldn't drink the father's blood. It smelled bitter from a mile away, so I just tied him up and left him to burn inside the house. I knew I didn't need to burn the evidence. No one would think vampires are running around killing people. It's always blamed on the poor wolves. But what can you expect from a human mind? I think I want to go to another Thanksgiving dinner. If I run fast, I can make it to California. They're 3 hours behind. All I need to find is a big family getting ready for dinner and a welcome mat on their front door. Careful who you willingly or unwillingly invite into your house next Thanksgiving. Or if you've had enough, just let me in. The soil on our property was different. We learned generations ago that it acted differently than other farms around the area and kept it a family secret. Plants we would grow would be larger than usual and grow much quicker than average, even in harsh conditions. It always let us sell more produce than our land should have been able to grow, which allowed us to rake in a decent profit every harvest season. One of my ancestors had buried a deceased horse in the same soil that they had tilled earlier, and a new horse grew from its grave. Small at first, a fetus, like a budding flower, slowly growing from a black, slimy vine jutting from the dirt. Within weeks, an adolescent horse broke free of the vine and spent the rest of his life as the family steed. In fact, he still is. Every time Jerome, that's what he was named, passed away, we would bury him in the fields and grow a new version of him. Jerome would remember small commands and memories, but was more of a reincarnation than an animal brought back from the dead. Like the soil used his DNAs, spliced it, and copied it the best it could. Since then, we would plant animals in our field, timing them out for harvest seasons and holidays. Last year, we saw something odd growing near our turkey plants. A human-shaped fetus was growing, jutting from a black vine. Nobody in my family admitted to burying a person on the land, and I do believe them. We looked into the local news and discovered a little girl had been missing, presumed dead. We figure that whoever killed her had seen our recently dug soil and hoped they could hide the evidence. There, we had the good old, is it abortion if we pluck her from a vine debate, and we agreed to allow nature to take its course. When she was big enough, we plucked the little girl from the vine and took her inside. This year, my family sits around the table with an extra booster seat set up for our youngest. Sally, the reports had called her, sat up with her black eyes and blotchy skin, giggling at the spread of food. What are we thankful for this year? My husband asked. Sally, our 3 children cried out. Sally wasn't an easy child, only nursing with cow blood, and crying in a pitch so high it would cause our ears to bleed. Giggling at night, when soft whispers would emanate from her room. Children are never easy, especially when they have an unusual upbringing. But God, is it worth it? You are so loved, I tell Sally, hugging her cold body, and it makes me shiver as she giggles with glee. She burps up some black slime on my shoulder, and our family laughs at the silly moment. None of us know what she'll grow up to be. But then again, does any parent? The silky reek of dollar store vanilla candles didn't mask the stench of rancid meat, it accentuated it. The aromas competed, each dodging the other and jabbing at my throat. Cloying, putrid, cloying, putrid. Amity stared at me from down the table, and I watched the candlelight dance across the sheen of fat on her wrinkled lips. Paul, care to tell what you're thankful for? Her voice rasped as tiny bubbles gathered at the corners of her mouth. Blinking, exhaling, I thought, but managed. F family. She returned a tight spasm of a smile. You haven't touched your turkey, Paul. Don't be rude and start eating. I looked down at my plate, suddenly keen to avoid the vibrating contempt in her small black eyes. The meat was gray, indistinct, pocked by the larval cradles of the dozen flies that now buzzed around the table. It's not my dog anymore, I thought. It's just turkey. It's not my dog. Rude. She suddenly spat through clenched teeth. I jumped, gasping sharply, catching an undertone of mothballs and rubbing alcohol in the enveloping miasma. She had already eaten half of the turkey. The slippery yellow mashed potatoes, a pudgy product of too much kibble, had given the errant hairs on her chin a glistening stiffness. I retched, swallowing a rising bile with the smallest bite I could manage. It's not my dog, it's not my calliope. Amity glowered and tapped her tar-stained fingernails on the table. All of it, Paul. The pain I put into this meal. You ungrateful little. It's just so filling, I stuttered. I felt something wriggle on the inside of my cheek and found it with my molars. It died with an acrid pop. My stomach twisted, trying to return the stringy lump of meat I had forced down. Amity watched on. She was my mother, but only by blood. What love she showed me was soured by sadistic codependency, a need to prove to me that she was everything I needed or deserved. I swallowed another clotted bite and gagged. Calliope was my dog for this year, a small knot, a rescue. Every Christmas, Amity would give me a new one, and every following Thanksgiving. She'd demonstrate that her affection was the only kind that persisted. I tried not to like Calliope. I hadn't been successful. I'm not stupid, Paul. What? I looked up on her, wondering what she was getting at. She struggled to light her first post-meal cigarette, talking around the filter. You're 14. Not a boy anymore. I know about your little girlfriend, your secret pocket phone. She drew on the cigarette and sighed a puff of smoke. You wanna be rid of me? Make a love nest somewhere else. A quiet bark sounded from Amity's side of the table. It was Calliope's. Well, Paul, I did you a favor. My eyes shot to the meat. When I looked up, Amity had rolled her wheelchair from behind the table. Calliope nestled in her lap. The meat was not my dog. Calliope then pulled at one of the bloody stumps, where Amity's legs used to be. So the meat was not my girlfriend either. You want me gone, Paul? Then keep eating. I never got why people love cranberry sauce with turkey. We spend Thanksgiving with Grandma, who lives on a bad side of town. It's one of those neighborhoods we're not allowed to stop in for any reason until we arrive, and the drive gets a little depressing with the amount of missing kid, missing dog, missing wife posters. But Grandma makes it worth it. When we arrive with our limped Tupperware green beans, we're met with Grandma's kitchen at full power. The oven holds a golden, crispy Titanic-sized turkey. The rack above it, homemade rolls are brushed with butter. Mashed potatoes are piled a mile high with boatloads of delicious gravy. The only part of the meal I dislike is Cousin Neil's homemade cranberry sauce. Fruit or jellied, it always tastes foul. One year it was too sweet, one year it was too bitter. One year, I swore he'd used rotten cranberries. Because Cousin Neil lives with Grandma, she is very protective of him and insists everyone have some of his sauce. If you don't, you'll get the Grandma eye. If you don't know what that is, it is a look that would strike fear into even the coldest heart. Finally, the meal I look forward to most each year has arrived. We all pull up our chairs. Grandma insists on serving me an ungodly amount of food, which looks absolutely salivating until a great big slather of cranberry sauce is thrown on top. Cousin Neil comes in back out from the shed outside. His apron is stained with cranberries. He piles himself an enormous plate, then shrugs into his chair. He digs into the mashed potato and cranberry to take a mouthful. "Neil, dear," Grandma reminds him gently. "It is Thanksgiving." Neil puts down his fork with an annoyed growl. That's always how Neil is. I think I've only ever heard him speak a full sentence twice in his life. We turn off the lights and light the candles around the table in the right procession. "Oh, dear," Grandma smiles as I struggle into my robes. "You're getting a little big, darling." The cranberry sauce is set in the middle of the table as we link hands, our hoods of our dark robes covering our eyes. Neil places a poster of a missing child around my own age under the cranberry pot. "Bless us, dear Ancient One, as we have done your rapture," Grandma spoke pleasantly. "May you look down on the work we have done and smile upon this good deed. May we continue to purge this earth of all we deem unworthy. Leave us be, leave us be," we all repeat. As I'm eating, I wince through most of the cranberry sauce as it squishes and squashes inside my mouth. I still don't understand why my family are so ravenous for it, especially when Uncle Tom picked out a shard of bone between his teeth with a laugh. But Grandma says I'll grow into liking it. All the family do. I'm running late. My palms are sweaty as I grip the steering wheel. I do a 100 on the freeway, the tires skidding on the road. Finally, I'm here. I steel myself and ring the doorbell. My mother answers it with a smile. "You're finally here. Come in." I sit down at the dining table and help myself to the food. The turkey melts in my mouth and is nice and umami. The cranberry sauce that I pour on top was sweeter than honey. The pies are filled with the sweetest raspberry filling, and the top is a deep golden brown. For this Thanksgiving, my mother really has outdone herself. Conversation and laughter erupts around me. Ruby red wine is poured into glasses, and we cheer and toast my mother. I take one sip and nearly spit mine out. It tastes strangely sweet and metallic. However, Everyone else is draining their glass and cheering loudly. But the words are blurred together, and their cheeks are rosy red. How much did they drink before I got here? Does the wine taste weird to any of you? I ask finally. There's an uncomfortable, short silence. Everybody's head creaks as they look at me. That's when I realize there's something wrong with their eyes. They are glazed over and bulging out of their heads, like they're hypnotized. We're just tired, that's all. They chorus, as if reading my mind. The night is getting weirder and weirder. I want to press them further, but then I hear something faint from the basement, like somebody's moving around. The laughter and cheers from earlier must have drowned it out. I glare at my relatives for an explanation, but they just sit there with strange smiles. I'm going down to check, I say finally. No one tries to stop me. The stairs creak as I descend, and darkness envelops me, so I can't see my hand in front of my face. The light from my phone shines bright like a candle as I hold it up in front of me. What I see next makes me want to throw up. Bodies are strewn everywhere, their chest cavities ripped open, and guts spilling out. Their faces are all gone too, but there's 2 words scribbled in blood on the floor that makes my blood run cold. Monsters upstairs. That's when the shadows melt together into something that lunges at my face. I dodge the first time, but on the second, it gets me. Long claws extend out of the shadows and peels off the skin like a rubber mask before placing my face carefully on its own. I collapse beside my family, blood staining my clothes and dripping on the floor, listening helplessly as the other me ascends the stairs, calling out, "Sorry about that, Mom. I love the wine. Can I have some more?" You slam open the door to your home and rush to your wife. She's feeding the baby. "Listen to me very carefully," you say. You look her straight in the eyes. You know that conspiracy about lizardmen infiltrating society. It's all true, all of it. Except instead of lizards, it's turkeys. I found proof, hard proof, about this. Now they're after me and our family. I'll explain more when we're safe, but we have to go. She stares at you, eyebrows raised. You grab both of her hands and take them into yours. I know this sounds absolutely insane, but it's the truth. You continue. If our marriage means anything to you, if our daughter's life means anything to you, then please do as I say and pack your bags. She opens her mouth to speak. Bang. You watch as your wife slumps face down on the floor. Blood pours out from the bullet wound on the back of her head. You look behind you and see a man holding a revolver. His eyes are fixated on your wife's lifeless body. "You have betrayed us," he says. His eyes turn to you. He steps closer. He's one of them. You tackle him to the ground. With great difficulty, you wrestle the weapon out from his grasp. You stand up and shoot him in the chest until the gun clicks empty. You catch your breath, looking around your home and at the bodies lying on the floor. Amid your baby's cries, you begin to weep. 6 months have passed, and now you're in a motel. You've been running and hiding the entire time, never staying in one place more than necessary. You want to fight. You want to expose this terrible secret to the world, but you don't know where to begin. You know from your research that the Turkey people hold considerable influence. They're almost everywhere, from the highest levels of power to the common people around you. You turn your attention to your daughter. Despite the difficulty of raising a child alone while mourning your wife, your baby has been the only source of stability in your life. You decide to prepare her for bed. You're changing her clothes when you find a small black feather embedded on her arm. You find another on her shoulder and 3 more on her back. The skin on her feet has hardened, almost like scales. Her toes, once plump and round, are now as sharp and pointed as talons. Your mind begins to race, but your thoughts are interrupted by your daughter's first words. Gobble, gobble.
Please subscribe, or the toxic skull will come for you.